Hello, I'm Senator Lisa Murkowski, and I'd like to welcome you to this edition of Veterans Spotlight, which is a partnership effort in my office and the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. This project was created by the Library of Congress back in 2000 as a way to preserve the personal accounts of American war veterans so that future generations may hear directly from veterans and better understand what has happened on our front lines. As we all know, Alaska's relationship with our veteran community is unique. We have the highest percentage of veterans in our population in the entire United States. Our veterans have served with distinction. They have served selflessly, and every single one of them has a story to tell. Veterans Spotlight is our opportunity to listen and learn. We can learn a lot about our country, our state, and ourselves from the men and women who have fought for us and the freedoms that we hold dear. We owe it to our veterans to honor them through sharing their stories, and we owe it to our nation to use their stories as lessons of patriotism, commitment, and service. If you have a parent, a sibling, friend, or a member of your community whose service to our nation should be shared with the nation, I invite you to reach out to me at spotlight@murkowski.senate.gov.
1967, I had an interesting story. I was going to school. I graduated in 1965 from high school, and then I went on to college at the Extension in Green Bay. And at that time, of course, you had a 2S deferment if you were going to school. And of course, I liked to party, and I had a good time, and I played a lot of cards, and so I ended up losing my 2S deferment, to say the least. And it didn't last too long. I think school was out in January, and I ended up being drafted in May of '67. So they didn't waste any time. They were drafting probably 35,000, 40,000 at that time every month. And just took my chances. I didn't sign up. I wasn't crazy about the war, but I took my chances, and like I say, 3-4 months I was. I remember I was kind of not paying attention. I was just a young kid, just kind of doing along, and so I probably should have been paying more attention, but I didn't. And all of a sudden I was in the military, and I asked my dad. I said, "What should I know?" Because he was a World War II veteran. And I said, "Dad, anything you can tell me?" He said, "Well, don't volunteer for too many things." I said, "Okay." I think he meant to take on more difficult kind of assignments, especially maybe putting your life in a risk is what he was probably saying. Talking from a father's perspective, he wanted me to come back, I guess. So, and I then after MP school, we had a 30-day leave, and then after 30-day leave, I went to Vietnam, and probably, I think it was the end of September of '67, first part of October. I remember when I first went into, I had orders to go to the stockade at Benoit, which was the Long Bin Jail. They call it LBJ, the Long Bin Jail. And I was supposed to be a stockade guard, but when I got to Long Bin, for some reason the orders were changed, and they sent me down to be an MP in Saigon, which was good. From my perspective, that was a good move, rather than being in a stockade. I didn't really want to be a stockade guard and do that. When I got the orders for transfer down to Saigon, I thought that was a better move. Saigon, I was pulled mostly security. I did a lot of patrols. I ran a gun jeep for a while, and I also had a lot of other things where I guarded the embassy, the American embassy, after the Tet Offensive in '68. As you know, they took over the embassy for a day or so there. And then they put a detachment of MPs on top of the embassy roof. We lived underneath the heliport there for about a month. And I stayed there for a month. I also guarded the ambassador towards the end of my stay in Vietnam. I was guarded him. That was really good duty there. A little detachment of MPs that guarded the ambassador's quarters where he lived in Saigon. Well, everything changed after the Tet Offensive. That was the that was the biggest offense as long as I was there in the war. Up till that time, Saigon was a in-country R&R. You could take in-country R&R into Saigon. So it was, we used to work 8-hour shifts when we were on in MPs at that time. We could wear civilian clothes and off-duty. So it was actually pretty good before the Tet Offensive. After Tet, the whole thing changed, where there was no longer in-country R&Rs. There was 12-hour shifts, and we were working 12 nights. You either work nights or you work days. And everything changed after the Tet Offensive. It was more like a war zone. Before that, it wasn't a war zone. For the first 3-4 months I was there. It's a scary situation to go over to Vietnam. When you first go over to Vietnam, you are scared. You know, you don't know exactly what to expect, what's coming. Then as you're over there after 3 or 4 months, you start to get used to things. And after you get used to things, of course, you get a little more confident, and you get a little more aggressive. And you talk about volunteering, well, okay, maybe I'll volunteer for this or that. So you go through a stage where you go from being scared to being confident and volunteering, and then you get towards the end of your tour, and then you start to get more, you know, conservative. I've only got 60 days left. Maybe I better not do that, you know. So that's what you do. And that's at least that's the way I did it. That's kind of how I progressed through my tour. I saw the war from a couple of two different perspectives. I saw it from the actual soldier's standpoint, the little guy that's just doing his job. And then also I had a top secret security clearance, so I was able to do things that maybe a lot of other soldiers couldn't do because I just had this top secret security clearance. Why I had it, I don't know. But I could guard things like the ambassador, like the embassy, like different things that maybe other soldiers couldn't do. So I saw where decisions were made by the top echelon, and I always thought, well, this is kind of interesting how this is happening. I was always outside the doors or doing something at the embassy or guarding the ambassador. So I saw it from a lot of from two perspectives, from the grunt kind of the soldier guy, and actually looking at these people that are actually making the decisions and doing the things that all these little guys are going to go do. And that had a profound impact on me, actually, really for the rest of my life, because I always was a little hesitant of trusting the system, if you know what I mean. I was always a little bit on the peripheral, where I always never quite thought, okay, I got to keep paying attention here because I don't want to get caught in a situation where I don't want to be. And that's where I felt when I was in the military. I felt I was in a situation that I didn't have much control over myself. When you're in the military, you really don't have control over your own destiny. You're kind of just doing what they tell you. And that was a hard thing for me to adjust to. Well, there's always those days. I remember when during the Tet Offensive, of course, you never knew what was going to happen during that first couple of days. Most war situations that I've experienced, most of the time it's 95% is pretty boring. But there's these little times when you come and you get these little 5% of the time where something happens and you have to take action, or a sniper, or during a situation where you got bombs going off, or people are shooting over in here. You don't know where to go. You're just heading for cover. And so those are times that you just react. I mean, you're just going to react to whatever the situation is, and hopefully you react in the situation where you're not. And I lucked out. I actually never got hurt. I don't think I had any post-traumatic stress from the war. So from that perspective, the war was changed my life, and it was very educational in the sense that I came out of it pretty well, as opposed to some GIs that didn't come out of it either mentally or physically well. And I think I came out of it very luckily. Well, I don't know about luck. Is an interesting thing, how it works. Some people, you don't have any luck. Some people have luck. I don't know. Maybe my mother prayed for me a lot. I don't know. She always said she did, and I think maybe it worked. I don't know. But there are some people that just don't seem to have luck, and some people do have luck, and I consider myself very, very lucky the way it worked out. I mean, just being in situations I can go back, why did this happen? Well, that was a funny coincidence, or why did this happen? And I was just over there about an hour ago, and this guy got his arm blown off, and he went through that same alley, and someone threw a grenade in the back of the Jeep. I was just there, but I went through it. I mean, it's just one of those little things. You're in the right place at the right time, or you can't put your finger on it, but maybe you do make your luck in some ways, maybe, you know. But served my tour, came back, was discharged, and then I went on to go to college, finished up my college career under the GI Bill. Graduated from the University of Wisconsin at Oshkosh. And then it was during the oil embargo, about the late 70s when I graduated. I graduated actually in 73. And that was right about the time of the oil embargo. And there was no work in Wisconsin. So that's when I decided to hitchhike up to Alaska. And I did that in 1974. Just kind of on the lark. And got to Fairbanks, and then ended up landing a job with Bechtel on the pipeline. Oh, let's see, that was a nice trip, actually. That took about, I think it took me about 8 weeks to come all the way up. I stopped along the way. I came up through Canada, because at that time, Trudeau was the Prime Minister of Canada, and he had a program set up for encouraging the Canadians to pick up hitchhikers. And he had set up youth hostels all along the highway. And I heard the word was to go up to Canada and hitchhike rather than the United States, because you could sit out on the road for a long time in the United States trying to hitchhike for days and never get a ride. But in Canada, they picked you up pretty quick. So, yeah, so I went up to Canada and hitchhiked up, and then went up to actually all the way to Whitehorse. Got a job. I actually hitchhiked up with Linden. Guys from Linden were hauling cargo and also mail, stopping all the roadhouses along the Alaska Highway. And I got picked up by these two brothers working for hauling for Linden. And they said, "We're not supposed to pick you up, but we're going to take you. You just look like somebody who won't give us any trouble." I said, "Okay." And so we got to Whitehorse, and I stayed in Whitehorse for a while. I met a German fellow there in the hostel, another Canadian guy, and we canoed down the Yukon River as far as Dawson City. And from Dawson, I hitchhiked down from there into. So it was. I'd spend time at a certain spot, and if I liked it there, I'd stay a couple days, 3 days. People would meet along the road hitchhiking, so I just took my time. Got up here probably in about the first part of July of '74. Yeah, and I got one ride all the way from Dawson City all the way to Fairbanks. I remember that ride. That was a good ride. Stayed in the Chena River Campground in Fairbanks for quite a few years. That was the year of the election, actually, and I remember that. And that's one reason now that I think back on it now, that this is all coming back to me now. Bill Egan was the governor at the time, and he had a campaign, little fundraiser at the Pizza Pub down right on Airport Way in Fairbanks. So everybody and his brother that was living at the campground, it was free beer and pizza and all you could eat and drink, so everybody was over there going, and here was the governor, Bill Egan, very gentlemanly. "Thank you, son, thank you, make sure you know who you're voting for." And I was real impressed with Alaskan politics at that time. I thought that was pretty interesting. This governor, I never met the governor of Wisconsin when I was there, but here I am, this guy just living in a tent at Chena River Campground, and here I meet the governor of the state of Alaska. So I was pretty impressed. I liked the politics of it. It was real local, it seemed. So it was one of the reasons I was sold in Alaska, I think. Since I've been out, I just have gotten, well, I got diagnosed with Parkinson's here about 2010. And since I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's, veterans have been helping me out on that. So that's been a very, very good, and they've been very good. I have to say that I never thought 40-some years after the fact of being discharged from the Army that I would get help from the veterans. It never even dawned on me, but they've been very, very helpful in my Parkinson's treatment, and I'm sure they'll continue on with that as it progresses.